Welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones. I am a certified personal trainer, and I'm here to help you achieve your fitness goals without pain. In each episode, I'll share tips and strategies that will help you stay safe and pain-free while you're working out. I'll also interview experts in the field of fitness and pain management. So if you're ready to learn how to stay active and pain-free, then subscribe to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones, and today's guest is Chad Dunn. Chad is a co-founder and CEO of Move Human Performance Center and Physical Therapy in Chandler, Arizona. After serving 2 years in federal prison, Chad rebuilt his life by dedicating himself to helping others overcome their limitations. As a certified behavioral change therapist with over 20 years of experience in health, modern fitness, and sports performance, he has supported everyone from NFL and NBA athletes to people recovering from catastrophic injuries. He is also the author of Mind Over Virtually Everything. Chad lives in Mesa, Arizona with his wife and business partner Jackie, who helps him build Move from the ground up. His journey of transformation and resilience offers a unique perspective on overcoming adversity and achieving peak performance. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Dana, thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
So you've had a very interesting past that led you to where you are right now. Like, how has that shaped your mindset?
I always say it's been an amazing journey. It's been an amazing journey. I've been very fortunate to get in some things and very fortunate to get out of some things. From the very beginning of it, it's always had a vision. I've always had a purpose, and I knew from the very beginning was to help people. I always looked at the physical therapy field, and I knew that was something that I want to do with health, fitness, and sports. I had an active lifestyle growing up, played sports. Rode BMX bikes, wrestled, played football. But then again, sometimes we hit some derailments and we hit some different turns in our life. And, here we are today. I made some right turns. I never call them wrong turns. I did call them wrong turn one time. They said, but I don't know if there's ever a wrong turn, because you still redirected and you got back where you went. So I don't think I can use that term wrong turn anymore. So I think I made enough of the right turns, and I ended up in the destination where right now, a CEO, co-founder of Move Human Performance with my wife and my wonderful team.
That's great. Now, you have talked about your belief system and how that people's mindset. I mean, and I love the fact that your title is a behavioral change therapist behavioral change specialist. And I guess one of my questions is like, why do what we believe or how we behave, how does that kind of filter the direction in which or trajectory in which our performance goes?
Well, with athletes and life in general, and I use this in relationships. So I always talk about business, sports, life, and relationships, because again, we're getting back to the person as a whole. And, when we talk about behavior change, and especially in this world nowadays that we live in, we have a lot of things that we need to change. There's a lot of things that need to be changed. But really, if you look deep down inside and you look at it, it really goes back into the behavior of some of these people, of what we do, of our societies. And it's not just here, but worldwide, is I think that we need to change. Are we trying to change them mentally? Are we trying to change them physically? Those are just two components of it all. But when we look at the changing of the behavior, fortunate, like I said, I've overcome drug addiction, or drug use. I don't like to use the word addiction because now, again, like I say, it's all about beliefs and choices, because I really simplify. Everything that I do is very simplified. It becomes to you, and you are the person that's responsible. We have to quiet the noise on the outside. We've all looked for help somewhere, sometime, somehow, some way. And we've gone to every therapist. We have all these coaches. But what we forget to do is we forget to look inside. We forget to look at us, and through my darkest days on the streets, chasing crack and trying to smoke crack from here to Oakland, California. From my days in ASU, partying with the best of the kids and doing the most irradical things that you can think about. Those are choices that I was making. Now, granted, they weren't right choices, but they were choices that I was making, and my behavior was showing for it all. I never thought that I'd end up in prison. I never did, you
Yeah.
know. But again, sooner or later, your actions of what you do and your character is what's going to lead you to be what you are. And I got in trouble, and I spent 2 years in prison, even while I was still doing all my coaching stuff, because again, I always had a job. I was a hard worker. So again, it's kind of one of those things too, is that I had a persona, I had a filter that I was a good guy, going to work, showing up, doing everything I had to do. But then as soon as the clock ticked out and I clocked out, I went back and had another lifestyle. It was fun entertainment. But again, those were the behavior. That was the behavior that I was doing. So, I go back in and coming out of prison and becoming this person that I wanted to be and who I am now. There was one thing that I thought about for those 2 years is that, Chad, you have to change your behavior, and that all starts with your choices.
That's interesting because I've been on, say, the flip side of it where I've attended Al-Anon meetings and because I grew up in addiction, and there's a huge behavioral aspect that it doesn't really get accounted for when you think about that, especially when you're looking at somebody who may be battling their relationship with substances. How's that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It is a release or a relief. You're trying to escape something, and there's that denial of accepting either feelings or thoughts or whatever may be the reason for it. And I think it goes on both sides of the coin. Like, a lot of people wanna point at the person who's doing the substances and say, like, "It's all your fault," or, "It's in your DNA. Everybody else was an addict in your family, so you're gonna be an addict," or whatever, that kinda thing, and kind of
100%.
putting that belief on people before that actually happens. But for the person who's also in that environment that may be, a spouse, a partner, brother, sister, child, whatever, they're kind of also creating behavioral, like, they're creating the perfect environment for all of that stuff to happen.
Yes.
And so there has to be a change on both ends, I
It
guess is
does,
what I'm saying.
Well, and again, it's like like we talked about earlier, how many times does people put labels on you?
Right.
When I first got arrested for my DUIs, which was, again, I was never the victim and I'm never the victim. I went out
Mhm.
and had fun, so I'd go party in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'd drive home to Chandler to go to bed, and then I'd go to work in Phoenix the next day. So I'm going through three cities and I'm having a heck of a good time. You have to go through counseling classes. They're going to go through the court system. They're going to tell you that you scored 36 out of 42 on a questionnaire that which makes you an alcoholic. I was an alcoholic at the time. I was a young college kid that liked to have fun and party, but they put a label on you.
Mhm.
And when people start to believe that label, it's kind of tough. When I was smoking crack, obviously, I started selling cocaine and I started doing all the party drugs and selling that to Scottsdale, but never once did I think that I would be down at the bottom, smoking out of a crack pipe. That was just not something that went to my head. But then again, here I am as I'm going through there, is that I got sucked into the people around me and they started to feel like I was part of that culture. I was a little bit hood. I was a little bit thuggish. I could go out there and go do whatever, but really in deep inside, that's not really who I was. But I was getting put labels by my outside surroundings. So when to prison, now you're labeled as an inmate. 62% of those people come back. Not me. I'm not a statistic. And that's kind of one of the things is that, when I got out of prison, I had one more counseling class I had to go to. And it was interesting because, through all the AA meetings you had to do inside the prisons and all the NAs, I had to go through those. I had them all prior when I got in trouble. But this one gentleman, he's going to stick with me forever. His name was Scott. And he was just a short little redheaded guy, the coolest counselor I've ever had. And we sat down and I had ladies that were addicted to heroin. I had gambling addicts. I had sex addicts in this class. There's a bunch of us that were court ordered to be there. This is my last one as part of my release from prison. And he looked at us all and he says, you know what? He said, there's one thing I'm never going to tell you guys. And you have one thing you're not going to hear in here. He goes, you're never going to hear the word addiction in this class. And I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy because I just came from all these other classes where everything it's a 12-step program. It's an addiction. Now, again, this is loosely because I'm a very simple person now as I've been through this all. And I started thinking it. And so I tuned into him on, he says, but what you're going to always hear me say is, man, y'all made bad choices. You know,
Mhm.
if you don't want a haircut, don't go to the barber shop, right? You have a gambling addiction. I don't understand why you keep continuing to go to the casino, right? If you have a drug addict, if you're a drug problem, if you like to smoke crack like what you do or whatever, I don't understand why you keep going back to the hood or to the drug dealer. Stay away from them. And I'm like, man, is it that easy? And so from day one, I started taking that on. And I'm like, man, this is an easy change. Now, mind you, I've just been in prison for 2 years. So I had a lot of self thought. I found my self identity, a lot of time for silence, a lot of time for breathing, a lot of time for self-reflection. And then when I came out, that meeting right there, it made me strong. And I said, today, it's all about doing one day in a row and making the right choices. And from there on, I changed my behavior. That was in 2008, and here we are 17, 18 years later, jamming.
That's fantastic. And that shows a lot about you. There's definitely some, I think, stronger people that are able to
Yeah.
do what you're doing and making the right choices, and it's just
My daughter's currently been on the street. She's been living and she's been in that issue, as a family member and everything else, for the last 7 years, she's been battling her drug usage, and she
Mhm.
always keeps telling me about addictions, and this and that, and we've seen it, my wife and I, we help out with our kids. We got a great family. We all eat dinner together, but kids are going to do what kids want to do. I came from a great family. My daughter got hooked up with some wrong things and she's doing some different things and she's been homeless period of times. She's also been sober. We've helped her out. We've brought her in. But at the times is that she has to make these changes, and I know it can happen because I've done it, but at that time is when is she willing to change her behavior, and that goes around your environment. You got to change your environment.
It's so true, and, what is it? You change your playground, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotta change your
Well,
playground.
I always ask the people, I said, what's environment? Is it the place that you're at or is it the people that you're around?
Well, it could be both, right?
And yeah, yeah. And most of the time it's the people,
Yeah,
most of the time it's the people because we don't look at, no, I was in a good place. I was at this great neighborhood. You were in a great neighborhood with bad people. You're still in a bad environment.
that's true.
And
That is very
and
true.
that's where we get caught up. That's where we get caught up in, So I was in a bad environment. I was a good person initially, but again, the outside of Phoenix is not, it's hood, but, and it's ghetto, that's where all the drug stuff happens. But it is what it is. You fit back in there, but it's the environment,
Yeah.
people.
No, definitely. And it's the same kind of parallel with chronic pain is that when you're in that environment, whether it's in your brain or physically, if I'm going to see you and all I'm doing is complaining about my pain all the time and complaining about everything, like even if you're my friend, that's not going to help me because all I'm doing is consistently programming my brain that,
Yeah.
this is my pain, this is, whatever. And then I either need you to say, dude, you're done. Like, how about you think about things differently or be like, peace out. I don't need to be around somebody who's so negative
Well,
about
yeah, and
themselves. And that's what we need to do virtually with everything, right? It's like,
sure.
how is this
But I always use a formula. I always use a formula. E plus R equals O. And it
exactly?
goes the same thing. Your event plus your reaction equals the outcome. And so that's how we do it. Move, and that's what we've done overall. Is that we've created a sanctuary for people to come for transformation. And that's really what our physical therapy, our sports performance center is that, obviously as an owner, my wife and I building our family, our therapists and everybody that we have, we've all overcome things. So we have a good team and we know we can help you do something because we've already overcome things ourselves. We've stressed in life, whether it be wanting to play at D1 basketball and you end up at a D3 college and then maybe an injury takes you out. There's always certain things that we all have, but, I've got one of our new therapists. He just came over here at 17 from Australia and he just now got his dual citizenship. So he played tennis down in Texas, and leaving his family behind to come over here to pursue a career in physical therapy. So how do you know you can relocate and still be successful? Our people have done that. And so what we've done
Yes.
to Move is we've created a sanctuary where you come in and you see people getting better. So how could you not?
Fantastic. So you've used specific strategies and techniques in working with somebody like Eddie King. So, how do you implement or foster in that positive self belief and people that are dealing with long, potentially long recoveries?
Sure. Well, you mentioned it earlier. Is optimism or is it pessimism? So when you come in, the first thing we got to do is we got to do an evaluation, and most people do the physical evaluation. They're going to look at your manual muscle testing. They're going to look at your gait pattern. They're going to look at all these different things. But the first thing I do is I do a psychological testing. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'm going to get inside your head a little bit and see how you respond. And if you respond like you're ready to go to war and you feel like you're going to have to win this battle, it's not going to be one big battle. This is going to be a bunch of small victories over and over and over. And I'm ready to see if you're willing to endure that, whether it's an ACL coming back for 12 months or if it's a spinal cord where it could be life changing, such as the birds. Are you willing to do this day after day after day? And that's what life is all about. Again, when I went into prison, when I got out, I had asked myself, Chad, are you willing to be this great person that you say you want to be now? And are you willing to do that day after day after day? I am. That's why I have my tattoos on my body, everything, all my beliefs are on my body because I have it written all over me that I am going to be that person. So the least I can do is show everybody, I can't have anything phony. So first thing I do, like with Eddie, he came in and I said, are you ready to go? And he told me the story about what happened. And doctor said, he don't know if you're ever going to walk again. And Eddie said, shit, you don't know who you're working with. That's all I needed to hear. Let's go,
Right.
buddy. We're on it.
Yeah. And that's it. So when you're dealing with something that is that catastrophic, Like, what is your I mean, aside, so first you do the evaluation to see if the person's in it for the long haul. And then
Sure.
what does it look like after that? Like, what are we working on? Like, how do you dip in and out of, are you like sprinkling in that emotional, mental support as well as the physical all the way through?
Yeah, I mean, everything. I'm optimistic. I believe that there's everything you can overcome. I've overcame a lot of things. From the criminal to the drug usage to being incarcerated. To owning a business, a convicted felon owning a business. There's a lot of things that I've overcome, and because I believe. And when Eddie walked out the first day, on the back of his shirt there was a word that said believe. A word that was on it said believe. And again, with the mindset and everything else. And at that time, I was fresh too coming out of here. I was just recently 4 or 5 years out of prison. And so what happened is that I'm rehabilitating them and they're rehabilitating me. With all these people that I had. And what happens with it, and I have a part of that in my book that I came out. Nowadays, you hear everybody say stacking days, right? We got to stack days, stack days. That's a big term that everyone's using, and it's becoming more and more useful nowadays. But as I started writing this book 16 months ago, and even how I started living my life in 2007 when I got out, my dear buddy Art died. He's a legendary basketball coach, started AAU out here in Arizona, was with George Raveling and with Nike and Peach Jam, and met Mike Bibby, Richard Jefferson. He was coach for all those guys. And what Art always said is, in order to be a good basketball shooter, you got to start with one in a row.
Mhm.
You got to make one in a row, and then you capitalize and you build on that. And so that's how I live my life. It's not stacking days for me. It's just doing it one in a row. And if you can do that 365 days in a year through your rehab, through your life, or even through your relationship, everything's going to come out nicely.
Yeah, that's crazy because there is that, well, that's what changes the behavior, right? Is that you're patterning, right? It's like, I can do
It
the
is.
one in
It
a
makes
row,
patterns.
and then you're all, yay, you celebrate the success, and then it continues. And hopefully you build. And I mean, we've always heard that, what is it? Like, success is never a straight line, right? And recovery is never a
Right.
straight line, especially when you're dealing with catastrophic injuries, because there are going to be good days, there's going to be bad days. And, they're just days at this point. You're just moving forward.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. We always talk about resilience, and I've used this with my guys at work, and I've kind of used this as my topic. I was listening to some guys speak last week, and there was I don't know if have you seen the video of the Duke professor when she's talking about resilience? She's like a
Maybe.
PhD doctor over there. So she was talking about resilience, and I even have it in my book, is the ability to bounce back over and over and over. It's the ability to endure things and to keep coming back, coming back. And it was kind of cool. She talked about resilience, and she said that she was on the chalkboard and she wrote what we know and what we don't know, or where we're at and where we want to be. There's a starting point, there's an ending point. And between it, there's a squiggly line that goes up and down and up and down. And you're going to get there and you're going to fall down and you're going to get better and you're going to get worse. And you're going to get upset and you're going to get happy. And so it had all these squiggly lines that you were just talking about, is that success is a lot of up and downs. And she said the definition of resilience is the time that you can stay in the period of frustration. And frustration is that up and down part. It's
Mhm.
not falling up and down. It's how long can you stay in that frustrated part and be resilient to overcome that and get to the next goal. And I thought, well, shit, for me, I know I sat there for about 30 months or 24 months in there, resilient, because I had to endure frustration of being told what to do and what not to do, and having my freedom, my choices taken away. Recovering from a catastrophic injury, there's going to be ups and downs. You're going to be frustrated. You can't walk. You're falling down. You're going to be able to get back up. You your scars from your burns are tightening up, and you got to loosen them back up. You're going to have to go and have another surgery because they have to change some of the skin grafts. And they're going, hey, that's resilient. That's resilient. It's how long can you endure the frustration stage?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
It is crazy.
So, well, speaking of resilience, there is I guess, a belief at this point that our young athletes are not terribly resilient. And you work with a lot of youth athletes, and I don't know what you could do to possibly change their mindset, but what advice do you offer them
What?
and their families? Because, you got the NIL stuff, that is making kids at 14 believe that they're God. Um,
Unbelievable.
and, we have travel sports, which is insane at this point. When I started 20 years ago, when I started coaching 20 years ago, travel was like fun. Yay, all right, you drop some cash, we play in some tournaments, and hopefully we play in a tournament where a coach notices you and everything will be great. But now travel is insane, and, people are dropping car payments on their kid to play 3 games or 2 tournaments and that kind of thing, and coaches now have access to stats all year round for somebody that they're looking at. And how do you teach these babies how to navigate this with resilience and skill? Which is hard to ask a 14-year-old, right, to kinda keep it
Of
together,
course.
but, you know.
Yes, it's hard, it's hard. Having people, like you said, we've had NFL players in there, not only just starting a business, but when we opened up Move in 2017, we started up in 3 years in business. It was always rough. And then we hit COVID, and COVID happened. So, we had to stay resilient. We had to change some plans. And our 2011 or 2021 was our best year due to the fact that a lot of the colleges shut down. And so the college athletes that were hurt, they still needed some rehab. And so a
Mhm,
lot of them were sent to Arizona, and so they came to Move. So we had people from Maryland, we had people from Oregon, TCU. So we had, and we had a great group of kids that we've already established locally. But then now we have a lot of these high-powered D1 athletes coming in that they could learn by. We took advantage. We were with Arizona Compass Prep Basketball, which is the nation's top basketball program at the high school level. On the guys program, I went to the Geico National Championships 2 years in a row with them down in Florida. Played against Montverde and IMG. Played all the top schools. I went to the McDonald's All-American game with Cody Williams. And so NBA draft, we went 2 years ago for the draft with Cody. So we've been there. My buddy Kane, who works with me, my staff, we've been there. We've seen what excellent looks like. So when these kids come in at this young age and they're told how good they are, we look at them and say, you haven't done shit yet. You're not
mhm,
there yet. You're not there yet. My job's not to tell you how good you are. My job is to show you how good you could be. And these kids understand because we've had a lot of pros come through there. We have a lot of 5 stars. You're nothing yet compared to where we need to be. And so with this, these kids have a great example of what to do. And it's all based off of character. It's all based off of character. I've got, pictures of our young kids that are standing there with the NBA guys. And when the NBA guys go out there and they perform and they go do what they have to do, and the NFL guys go out there and perform what they have to do, it's helpful for these kids. But the way we have Move, my wife, she's the GM of everything. When you walk in the door, she's going to look at it all. And she just sits in her office. She's got a dual way mirror, and she'll come out and say, that person don't have it. I said, why is
mhm,
that? She said, well, because they only did 6 of the 10 reps you told them to do. Right. So we're always watching. We're going to hold you accountable, and we can see which ones have the accountability. And I think that's the biggest thing right now is that the way that coaching has happened, we all have specific individual, including me, sports performance trainers. So all of these kids are always told what to do nowadays. They don't have any critical thinking. They can't think for themselves. And so when they're told what to do, when they come down, my style for me is I don't have to coach stuff that you understand. Right. If
mhm,
you understand it, then let's move on. Let's go to the next phase, or let's go work on something differently. But again, a lot of these kids, they have to be told what to do. Stand on one foot. Well, what do you want me to do with the other leg? If you're standing on one foot, lift the other leg up. It's not that hard. We did say to. You know what I mean? So it's the detail stuff is that everything is very, 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 told what to do. These kids are going to have to figure it out, because what happens if I'm not there? What happens if Kane's not there? Who's going to take you through? Let's say you go on vacation and you have to go work out. What are you going to do for your workout? Do you know what you need to do? And these kids really don't. So I think a lot of that has to show up, or has to show that they have to have a little bit more critical thinking. And with that, you talked about earlier skills, right? I think the skills of these kids are just unbelievable nowadays. They're very skilled due to the fact that they have coaches like me as a sports performance guy. They have coaches like Kane and all of us that are coaches. They've got yoga coaches. They got batting coaches. They got pitching coaches. It's there, but I don't know if the thinking is.
yeah. Well, and that's always the tough part, and it's the same thing I have in high school, where I'll have them do something, and if it's too much, they're like, "Why can't you just give me the answer or give me a packet," or something like that, like, there isn't that struggle, but that's not everybody. But
No,
it's
that's not.
definitely a large majority, like, not a majority, we'll
I
call it
mean, but
half.
there's half. But again, though, that kind of goes, and I take that back. It goes back in prison too. Guys don't want to be told what to do, or people don't want to be told what to do. Oh, it's one of those things, and they tell you, well, then if you don't want to be told what to do, figure it out. And because sooner or later, I'm not going to be with you. You're going to be released from here, and you're going to go on to your life, and you're going to do whatever. Now, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and I have to tell you what to do again, you will be back. right? But that's like sports. That's like coaching. That's like anything that we do in life, But it's opposite. We don't need to be told what to do right now. We should be able to figure this out. We're critical thinking people out here, and I think that's what we have to get back to right now. So it's different. Is that inside we don't want to be told what to do, but outside they want to be told what to do.
Yeah, it's weird.
So like you say, and you can see the people that are in it. 50% of people that are in there have to be told what to do. And the other 50 said, just leave me alone. Let me do my time. And that's what we need to be out here. We need to see productivity. We want to see the ones that can take charge. And that's really who you can see is going to be able to make it to the next level. It's the one that's going to take charge and do it on their own.
Yeah, it blows my mind because there's so much money with NIL, and it's
Crazy.
really, I think it's messing with everybody. And when you're having these babies with this kind of money, I mean, because we've all, if you played on a sport, you've had the people on your team that are like
I've
super
had a bunch of
arrogant,
them.
right? That think that they're like fantastic, and you're like, no, dude, and even as a coach, I dealt with players who I would make them run, and they're like, why am I running? I'm not going to run in college. And it's like, well, you haven't been to college, and I have, and I could tell you you're going to run. Because if
Hmm.
you're playing in a tournament, softball tournament, you're playing 6, 7 games in a weekend, and if you wanna be the starting catcher, then you're gonna have to catch all those games, so that's something you're gonna have to suck it up and be able to do, and you can't do it without endurance.
No, or life, right? Everything's
Right,
endurance, and that's the thing too. So you talk about that. Well, why do I have to run? Because it's good for your health and your mental health as well.
right.
You know, it's going to get you out of your comfort zone. And that's really what it is. As coaches, we know that. I was like the basketball. Say we're going to go run a mile, and they still do it now. That's kind of old school, new school stuff coming back. I think Houston brought it back in last year, where they said, "Hey, we have our fives and our fours that are running a 5:35 miles still. They're just dogs." But we always go back. When do you ever run a mile in basketball? You never do. It's always start stop. So it's a series of a bunch of sprints. But again, is that worth testing? We know you can start and stop and go up and down the basketball court, but can you endure that for a pure 5 minute duration of something of just a little bit of pain? And so that you have to get out of your comfort zone. It's mental. It's more mental instead of just physical. It's more mental to go do this
But
stuff.
on the other piece, if I'm looking at professional basketball teams right now, the people who stand out are people that are capable of playing more than 14 minutes in a game.
All day long.
Right. You look at somebody like Kevin Durant, who is a wonderfully skilled player,
Mhm.
but is always injured. And you have to wonder, is conditioning part of that injury piece?
Yeah. Well, and when they get to the NBA, it's a little bit easier than college. So they say, because you get a bit more off days and travel days and you're not grinding as much. But it still goes back into discipline. It
Mhm.
still goes back in discipline and how you prepare for it all. Body types. You look at basketball right now, the 5 out, it's a completely different structure of the game. There's no more Carl Malones, there's no more, Charles Barkley's, the big boys that are in there. So the game is constantly changed, being around the basketball at a high level. We currently have Bruce Branch, who's the #1 kid in the nation, class of 2027. So they just played this weekend over at Border League. He's at Prolific. So they were in Napa, and in Prolific Prep, they just moved to Florida. So he's playing for them. And the one thing that I talked about, Bruce, is that, are you obsessed with the game or do you love the game? If you love the game, you're not going to make it. And Bruce has even brought that back. That was from Derrick Rose when he was over there in Europe. He was talking with D Rose, and D Rose said that, you got to be obsessed with the game to be able to come back from injuries after injuries. If you love the game, when you get hurt, you're never going to come back. And so my thing with Bruce, and I even talked to him, he had 30 points the first game. And I talked to him afterwards and I said, are you sure that you really want to play this game? I said, because when you get to college, they're going to eat you up. You're going to be a freshman coming in at a high level, and they're going to say, this is my court, not yours. You have to
Mhm.
stand up for yourself, and you got to be that dog. He said, yes, coach. He says, I want this. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah. Well, and that's the biggest thing too, because of the fact that there are people that don't like that you're here, right? When you look at certain players that have come in, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna teach this guy a lesson," just because of the way it is, right? I mean, we see it in football a lot of times where they'll give you a welcome to the league hit, and it's like, can you tolerate that? Because you're probably your whole first season is going to be a welcome to the league hit.
Yep.
And every time they're gonna watch you get up and they're gonna say, like, "Are you getting up a little slow? Or are you looking a little, like,
Hmm.
sheepish?" Or whatever? Because any hint that you can't hang, and then they're like, "Ah, it's alright, we got your number now."
Overseas basketball, I got a lot. We got a lot of guys that play, guys and girls that play overseas basketball, and one of our kids the other day, he's in town, they're getting ready to go out again. But he says, the first thing when the Americans come over there, they get an elbow to the chest, and they want to
Mhm.
see how they're going to react. He says, and half the time he goes, the American, they got to come back because it's just so physical over there in Europe. It's a different game, which is what we see too, the finesse and the physicality. So it's kind of interesting how it all goes together. But like you said from the original, with Kevin Durant and the preparations, it's hard because we develop these kids from a young age, the NIL that we're talking about. They're playing AAU every week and they're traveling. It's a lot of miles. It's a lot of miles on your body. But if you don't do it, you're going to get left behind. And so you have to find that happy medium. And I think that's where the recovery, I think that's when the downtime, that's when the time just to be a kid and to be that student athlete. I think that's what becomes important. But because again, I don't even know if scholar athletes still exist anymore because they're only in school for 1 or 2 years. And now it's really just an athlete that goes to school. You still at the end of the day, rule number one is sooner or later you're not playing the sport that you love, and what are you going to do afterwards? And so we tell these kids from the young time, like you said, you haven't made it yet. You got to make it. You got to make it to be good.
Yeah. Well, and I'm laughing because I noticed Johnny Manziel is popping up again, and he's one of the classic examples of, like,
Classic.
just blowing his stuff up and
Uh-huh.
still he's still challenged according to him. And so how do you I mean, I know the NBA started implementing financial advice and things, and I know you only do deal with mental and physical aspects of it,
Yeah.
but, like, how do you help them mentally adjust to the changes in their status? As
Yeah.
they're starting to get more attention and as they're starting or even, like, going to Europe and playing for a summer or doing those things, like, how do you help them navigate those changes without getting sucked into, like, I made it even before they
Yeah.
made it?
And both ways too. There's a lot of the guys that, it's your self identity. It's your self identity. I have a
Mhm,
kid right now and, love him to death. He's a heck of an athlete. He just went to NAU, was going to play basketball up there. And he just made the decision about 2 days ago that he's not going to play anymore. Right? He just decided it's not for him. He's having some mental issues, whatnot, which we've kind of helped him with doing some of these things. But he decided to throw in the towel and he's not going to play anymore. That's okay. That's his decision that he's made. That's his choice that he made. Now you're there to support him and welcome to life. Welcome to life. This is when the shit gets real. The game is fun. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's very hard to show up every day. It's hard to be grinding. When they say that you have to, have fun doing the game, it's really not fun. But you have to, like I say, be obsessed with it all. So on that side of it all, you try to help some of these kids, and at the end of the day, they're going to make their own choices. They're going to make their own decisions. But you got to lead them in the right direction. You got to be there to encourage them, and to help them with whatever they need. We have a lot of the guys that have made it to the NBAs and into the NFLs, and there's some of them that I don't even talk to anymore become on a big platform. There's new trainers because the new agents that have around, they get people with new trainers. And now you got to go train with my guys because they're on my payroll and, they don't come back or, hey, I'm going to go work out over here because these guys have the Taj Mahal and you guys are a smaller practice. And we moved up, we moved up. But at the end of the day, I've got a lot of the people that play and a lot of good ones that come back around and they say, hey, man, this is where I started. This is where I'll finish it. Don't ever forget where you come from. I was just talking with Alex Barcelo. He's playing over there in Europe, and he's just enjoying it through Belgium and France. I think he's currently in Spain again. And I put a thing up there about don't forget about the ones who were helping you win before you were winning. And he
mhm.
responded back and said, Coach, he says, I appreciate you, man. He says, you know what? You guys have a team of winners. He goes, and that's what you developed in me you know. And so you tell there, but that goes back to the character to me. That really goes back to the character. I've had a lot of them that come back, and I have a lot of them that don't. And for me, it just shows the demonstration of who they are and what they really represent. And I've got more in the pipeline. I've got the next one up. So what we do is we'd help develop people with a better character and just understand and appreciate where you came from.
I love that. I think people in youth sports, especially parents, need more people like you who are looking out for the well-being of their athlete as opposed to, I don't know, marketing my athlete or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. I don't
Success
know.
should market themselves. Yeah, well, the success should market themselves. And
Right.
for me, like I always tell these people, they say, man, you're such a good guy. You help out these people. You've had a lot of, I said, but if you don't do good, I'm no good. I'm
Mhm.
only as good as you are. I'm only as good as you are. I look at it as a team aspect, even with my team at work. We're only as good as everybody that shows up. So if you guys can just work together and we have a good team, then we're all going to be good, And I think that's what the world needs now more days. And that's the behavior that we talked about. We need more good behavior. And that comes back with compassion. And I think that comes back with the heart. You got to be passionate. I'm not a dictator. You're from being a coach yourself. You know a bunch that there's a lot of dictators and there's a lot of leaders. And I don't think the fearful coaching works anymore with these kids, so that dictatorship doesn't work. And I want to be more of a leader. I want to inspire you. I'm not here to influence you. And I want to let you know that you can do it because I've done it.
That's fantastic. Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining me today. I really
No,
appreciate it.
nope. I appreciate you having me on, and it's good talks because, it's what people need to hear. And from having a
Sure.
background, it's hard being a coach. We all get caught up in things because we have to deal with a lot of the mental things that our clients bring us. And at the end of the day, psychologists or coaches or behavioral change specialists, at the end of the day, it becomes with the behavior. And that's all we're going to try to do is produce a better generation with a better behavior.
That is so true. So if somebody wanted to work with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Obviously, we got moveperformance.com. That's our business, speaking and everything else I have for mindovervirtualeverything.com. My book will be released here October 28th on Amazon, titled Mind Over
Fantastic.
Virtual Everything. 10 codes to transform your life. So it's not just about sports, it's just about life in general. So it's a great book for a simple solution of finding who you want to be and what you want to do. And also on Instagram, I've got all the handles, Move Performance and Chad Dunn.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for joining me. We'll
No,
talk soon.
no, Dana, thank you for having me.